please welcome.
Good evening to everyone. Thank you for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure because we've seen growth of what is a nascent knowledge sector here. Of course, it's funded, it's subsidized, it's spearheaded by a lot of foreigners, but we see a lot of grassroots level developments and real belief. So I was not told that it will be recorded, and I will take a risk to start with a manipulative question. And then afterwards, I will still dare to do. I originally come from Macedonia. A lot of this context is not unusual. To me, it's quite known, and I've been working for many years, not only in Western Balkans, but it was in Eastern Europe, and as well in the last 4 or 5 years as well, witnessed a lot of travails in the similar sector in Western Europe, which allegedly has abundance of information and abundance of evidence, but not necessarily always greatest policies. After the manipulative question, I will go with a bit of evidence. I didn't dare to go and open the Pandora's box of knowledge. And I would like to conclude with very short, in a way, homage on the work that we do with the think tanks and why I still believe in that work. So, my first question for you is, I would like to ask both those who come from abroad, but also those who are here from Kosovo, to think of a piece of evidence, or a piece of evidence they have in their mind about relations between Albania and Serbia. So can you tell me one piece of evidence that comes to your mind when I ask you, okay, relations between Serbia and Albania?
The drone?
Economic exchanges.
Sorry?
Their economic exchanges.
But numbers, can you tell me a number?
Yes.
Yeah, what is the number?
I can't tell you on this one, I can tell you others.
No, I want this one.
Okay, this one I don't know actually.
Uh-huh.
But if you want visits by high officials, 0 since the last, many decades ago. I'm trying to be a good student.
No, it's okay, it's fine. You're an excellent student because you don't have a data. You have a piece of evidence about Serbia-Albania relations?
2 flights a week from Yat, Tirana, Belgrade from last month.
From last month. Any other piece of data of evidence?
Can we join?
Yeah?
I think 300 million euros of import from Serbian goods to Kosovo. Roughly.
No, not Kosovo. Albania.
Albania.
Serbia, Albania. No, not Kosovo. No, that will be a cheap shot. Albania?
No, Albania.
No, Albania, no. Okay, now, the second part of the question, exactly. Can you tell me one symbol or something that comes as an emotion when it's related to Serbia-Albania relations? Something that's stuck in your mind.
Drone.
Drone, good, okay. And what's the symbol?
Eagle.
Eagle. Do you know what she's talking about? Locals, do you know what she's talking about? Drone, eagle, symbol, football, map. How much time you spend discussing this?
You want numbers?
Yeah.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, to the foreigners here, there was a particular football match that has been interrupted by a drone with a map of big Albania and an eagle that was flown with a drone over the stadium in Belgrade that caused eruption by the audience there and jeopardized the safety of the players. The game was abandoned and the rest of the region spent 2-3 weeks. Some people are still continuing to discuss this symbolic display of basically the large Albania in the middle of Belgrade. Why I'm mentioning this and why I wanted to put it up front as a manipulative question. I want to put it up front because actually when you think about evidence, its opponents are much stronger. Its opponents even in the way how not only our brain is wired, but actually what we get as a daily stimulation. So all of you who have been here will immediately think, oh my goodness, the drone and the map and how the players were running in their safety. what the debate has been there, and I'm afraid that what you mentioned about the flights will get lost, and frankly it will get lost vis-a-vis the numbers of trade, which may have increased in the same period after the drone incident, but we will not know, because our attention and the attention of the people, especially on the ground, will be so much shaped and formed at this symbol, and will be actually replicated into that. So there's a lot to say about evidence, but I like to start in a way looking at around the dinner table, and I start with myself and what kind of evidence in my family was used when I was a kid. My grandfather didn't use a single piece of evidence. He used the authority of the head of the family. So all of us had to be at 3 o'clock at lunch, irrespectively of the work obligations of my parents, or school, or if you've been in the second shift, was pardoned and so. But in principle, around the dinner table, only 2 generations before mine, there was nothing about evidence. It was more about the general power. When I was growing up, maybe, and I'm saying maybe because I was growing up together with the democratic transition, which in my country happened in the 90s, and then sort of we forgot it in the 2000s. I don't want to even think of where it's now. Around the table, my parents allowed me to not only to talk a bit, but sometimes maybe to raise a voice and argue against some of the decisions that they will do. But I wonder today, when I look at an average family around the table, what will be the evidence, and what will be actually a bit less the symbols, more the data, more something that could be verifiable, that people use in their everyday life around the dinner table. The reason why I'm saying this is because actually when you start from there, then the question is how that translates to the street. And when I say how that translates to the street, for me it's not only about whether the kids, when they go on the street, they start using and say, oh, I beat you the day before yesterday in football, or whether you stole my marbles, although today nobody plays marbles, but the things what people talk to each other. And then the other thing is actually, then you see who talks, and what is the interaction, and what is the traction. In socialism, a lot of things were sort of equal. They looked equal, but often the way how the settlements were structured, also the traction on the street level was between different classes. And when I look at the debate today, I'm also asking myself, when it goes to the street, do we use evidence? And then how that evidence stays within the echo chamber, because now, more or less, the poor people will live in one type of one settlement, and those that are richer have moved out and live in another settlement. The reason why I'm using it is actually to link it with another discussion, which is how much evidence we have, let's say, in the debate about equality and inequality. And this is not particularly Western Balkan problem. This is actually an issue that permeates the entire world. But in a way, when you look at all these numbers, both in the developed and the developing countries, and that's relatively well documented, how much of those numbers that show inequality make it to the debate and make it to the evidence. I don't want to sound, all gloom and doom. There is one area in the Western Balkans where I think evidence is the key. It's betting industry, and it's sports. And irrespectively of the level of education, you would see that people who are engaged in betting are masters of evidence. They know what the fourth league score in the Swedish league scores are, and they follow really diligently, and they will know who is injured, who is not injured, and actually they will place their choices, many of them, on what is actually a properly researched subject. Now I ask myself, how on earth we do this for betting, most of the time to lose the money eventually, because this is also the way how sport and gambling works. How none of that translates into business, and how very little of that translates into policy and political making. So where is the role of evidence in all this? For me, it's very interesting to speak to my colleagues in the various countries, but it's more interesting to speak often to businessmen. It's interesting that so often they're ready to buy monopolies and maintain them. They're very good in increasing the efficiency of their monopolies, but they will not look for evidence of what does it do, what damage that will do to the rest of the society. When you talk about politics and even policy, I like to separate them, although in none of our languages there is a separation between these two words. I really would like to ask how much of the votes, how much evidence is there? And surprisingly, I divide it in two separate sectors. When it's about number of voters, politicians are data machines. And actually it's amazing how much of the technology from much more sophisticated and developed places have really been exported and have taken ground in the Western Balkans. So politicians, more populist they are, more entrenched in the numbers they will be. They will wake up with that. And then interestingly enough, once when you cross this side of, am I popular today? And when you start thinking what problems I'm supposed to solve, then evidence becomes much more relative. And we all live in this duality. I don't have an answer to that, but I want to make sort of, in this opening remarks, to really think hard in a way, in assessing the strength of the evidence opponents. And I come from think tank fund, we deal all the time with evidence. I work with higher education, we deal all the time with knowledge and the production of it. We all believe in that. We all believe in the value of it. But I really would like to look at what are the opponents, and actually to look at the symbols and the way how they are manipulated, how both businesses and political sector has actually started using evidence for completely instrumentalized and not necessarily for public benefit, but instrumentalizing the manipulation of the population. I don't fool myself that this is since the beginning of times. What scares me is the sophistication at the moment. I also try to see how we are subject to forceful discourses where actually evidence itself becomes the bad thing. But data becomes a bad thing. And probably, I don't know whether you will speak about that or not, we all, the democratizers of this world, repeat the mantra of, go to the media will play the role, they will inform the public and so on. And it works well in the textbooks, it works well in a couple of countries maybe in the world today, if it does at all. But then actually what happens is that the society is exposed to more evidence and data, which rather skews their opinion about its objectivity than it actually increases the value of it. I'm not going to go into details. Now, in spite of all of this, why I still believe in the work of think tanks, and this is not only because my check is, my monthly salary is paid for that purpose. It's also because I believe that within the think tanks there is something that other sectors have failed, which is a bit of the production of the knowledge, which unfortunately the universities have lost in this sector. I would love them to regain it, but it's much harder to resurrect a university of 20,000 students and maybe 1,000 professors than to create a small, relatively agile organization of 10, 20 people who are smart and then they can produce knowledge. I also believe that in spite of all authoritarian tendencies, of all manipulations, of all lies and so on, I believe that there is a need for us to get the alternative interpretation, or maybe to get even the data and then alternative interpretation, even if that will not make the political discourse, even if that will not influence it in real time, but at least to stay within the general perception or the general body of knowledge what a country has. And then the last, which is not a, it sounds like a prosaic reason when it comes to the think tanks and so on. It's for me there are so many things that we lost about merit in this society, where people always were well connected, always social capital was important. But there were, and I'm speaking now probably more about former Yugoslavia, there was a layer of merit that often was added to the social capital. And for me, at least pushing a bit the evidence and building a bit the knowledge becomes at least a microcosmos in which there is a bit of merit in addition to the social connections. And I don't want to glorify, these organizations are also subject to a lot of good work, but also mediocre work. They're also subject to sometimes being in better relations with the donors than the policy makers themselves. It's not an ideal world, but at least within this microcosmos, they cannot do and pose as researchers as long as they don't have a small layer of merit. I'll stop here. I think I hope it's enough, and then we can extend this discussion further on to the much more dangerous question of knowledge and its role in our societies.